Tristan Hale hit the ground hard, the back of his head bouncing off the slick pavement as rain pelted down in sheets, drowning out the gasps of the crowd around him. "Hey, are you okay?" a voice called, cutting through the storm. Disoriented and soaked, Tristan blinked up at the woman crouching beside him, her hand reaching for his. She looked like she'd stepped out of a different world, messy chestnut hair clinging to her face, denim jacket soaked through, eyes wide with concern. She didn't hesitate, not even for a second, before grabbing his arm and helping him up like she had no idea she was touching a man worth over $40 billion. And she didn't. That was the best part. "I'm fine," Tristan muttered, brushing water from his face and trying to stand upright without slipping again. His driver had parked too far from the curb. He jumped out mid-call and lost his footing. The sidewalk was chaos, umbrellas flying, people shouting, and him, lying flat on his back in a $6,000 suit. "You sure?" the woman asked, still holding his elbow. "Yeah. Just my pride." She laughed, quick and bright. "Well, that's lucky. Pride heals faster than a skull." He gave her a look. "You a doctor?" "Hardly." "Greer O'Malley," she said, offering a hand. "Graphic designer, part-time dog walker, and unofficial sidewalk rescue." He shook it. "Tristan. Tristan." He hesitated. "Just Tristan." She raised an eyebrow. Mysterious. "All right, just Tristan. You gonna be able to walk, or do I need to call someone?" He looked down at his soaked trousers and ruined Italian leather shoes. "I think I'll live. Then come inside. You're dripping." Before he could protest, she tugged his arm and led him into the corner cafe behind them. He didn't argue. Not because he was cold, though he was. Or because he was hurt, though his ego definitely was. But because something about her, the stranger dragging him out of the rain like he was just a guy and not the CEO of Hale International, made him curious. Inside, the cafe was warm and smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso. "Sit," she said, pointing to a small table by the window. "I'll get you something hot." Tristan didn't sit when told. His assistant couldn't even schedule him without 3 approvals. But he sat. Greer returned a minute later with 2 mugs of coffee and a towel she must have begged from the barista. She pushed 1 cup across to him. "Thanks," he said, wrapping his fingers around the mug. "You didn't have to do all this." "I know," she said, smiling. "But I couldn't just let you splatter on the sidewalk and limp off into the rain like a sad movie character." He chuckled. "Better than being the villain in a suit. I've dated that guy." She wrinkled her nose. "Twice. Never again." He liked her. That thought hit him fast and unexpected. She had no idea who he was. No clue he owned half the skyline they could see through the window. She wasn't trying to flatter him or sell him something. She was just being real. "So, Greer O'Malley," he said, testing the way her name felt in his mouth. "What's a graphic designer / dog walker doing in this storm?" "Client meeting. Canceled last minute. I was just about to head home when I saw you fall like a cartoon character." He laughed. "Did it look that bad?" "Oh, it was dramatic. Legs in the air. Wailing violin music in the background." He sipped his coffee, watching her over the rim of the cup. She was funny. Sharp. And beautiful, though not in the polished, PR-approved way he was used to. She wore no makeup, her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and her jacket had a rip in the sleeve. She looked alive. "You're staring," she said, her eyes narrowing. "I'm just trying to figure you out. I'm not that complicated." "I doubt that." She tilted her head. "All right, your turn. What were you doing in the middle of Manhattan, running through puddles like a lunatic?" He grinned. "Important call. Bad timing. Must have been really important." "It was. But I think you saved me from a concussion." She raised her cup. "To well-timed rescues." He clinked his mug against hers. "To Greer." They talked for over an hour. About nothing and everything. Her freelance design work, his vague mentions of business, her rescue beagle named Pickles, his hatred for umbrellas. He didn't mention the black car idling outside, or his office in the tallest building 10 blocks away, or the fact that his phone had buzzed 53 times since he sat down. He didn't want to ruin it. Eventually, she glanced at the clock and stood. "I've got to get going. Pickles has abandonment issues." He stood too. "Can I walk you?" She looked outside. "It's still pouring." Then I'll get you a car. She laughed. What are you, royalty? He shrugged. Maybe. Thanks. But I'll take the train. He pulled a card from his wallet. If you ever need a concussion-free coffee again. She took it and read it, her eyebrows lifting. Hale Group. He smiled. Guilty. Her mouth parted slightly. Wait. As in Hale Tower. That's me. She blinked. You're Tristan Hale? The guy who bought out 2 news networks and a shipping line in the same week. He nodded. She let out a low whistle. I helped a billionaire off the sidewalk. He leaned in. And didn't ask for a thing in return. She tucked the card into her jacket. I think I liked you better when you were just Tristan. He smiled. Then keep calling me that. She held his gaze for a second too long. Maybe I will. Then she walked away, disappearing into the rain with Pickles probably waiting at home. Tristan stood by the window watching her go. He didn't know it yet, but the woman who had pulled him off the pavement was about to turn his entire world upside down. Tristan stood in the private elevator of Hale Tower. The high-speed ascent smooth and silent as the numbers climbed toward the top floor. His assistant, Carter, stood beside him, tapping notes into a tablet with the precision of a surgeon. She declined the car again, sir, Carter said without looking up. Walked straight into the subway at Grand and didn't even hesitate. Tristan tilted his head slightly. She always goes to the same place? Same route every time. Transfer at 42nd. Exits near a brownstone in Astoria. Looks like she's renting the top floor. Quiet neighborhood. Rent controlled. Any debt? No. Credit score is clean. No criminal record. She filed for a business license last spring, O'Malley Creative, but it's just her. No staff. Tristan watched the city blur through the glass walls. Don't look into her family. Not yet. Carter hesitated. Understood. The elevator doors opened to reveal a spacious penthouse office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that stretched across the Hudson. The early morning light painted the room in cold steel and glass tones. Tristan walked straight to his desk and opened his email. 112 unread messages. He closed it. He wasn't used to thinking about women after a single meeting. He met hundreds a year at galas, boardrooms, negotiations, and forgot most of their names before dessert. But Greer O'Malley had stayed. Not in a haunting way. In the way a melody lingered after the music stopped. Tristan opened his calendar. Meetings back-to-back until late. A dinner with foreign investors. A call with the East Asia division. A ribbon cutting for the new development in Milan. He stared at the screen for a moment, then tapped one event. Cancel the dinner. Reschedule the Milan call, he said. Carter blinked. Sir, that dinner's been locked in for 6 weeks. They flew in last night. Then tell them I'll pay for their hotel another night. I'm unavailable. Carter didn't argue. He knew better. That evening, Greer stepped off the train with a portfolio tube slung over her shoulder and paint on the side of her hand. Her day had stretched longer than usual, a last-minute logo revision for a picky tech startup and a frantic dog client whose golden retriever had eaten half a sock. She didn't see the car until she was halfway up her block. The sleek black vehicle idled at the curb, a man in a charcoal suit standing beside the open rear door. He held something in his hand, a small box wrapped in deep navy paper with a silver ribbon. Miss O'Malley? He asked. She stopped. Yes. He extended the gift. From Mr. Hale. She blinked. I didn't give him my address. The man offered a practiced smile. He's resourceful. She took the box reluctantly. What is it? He requests your presence tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock. Transportation will be arranged. She narrowed her eyes. And if I say no? Then I'm certain he'll find another way to ask. The car pulled away as quickly as it had arrived, leaving her on the sidewalk with the box in hand. Back in her apartment, Pickles sniffed the ribbon suspiciously while she peeled it open. Inside was a single item, a silver compass. Polished, antique, and engraved on the back with words that made her sit down. Let's see where this goes. Tea the next evening. Tristan stood beside a private helicopter on the rooftop of Hale Tower, the city glowing beneath him like a circuit board. The blades whirred softly, casting wind across the rooftop. He wore a black coat over a tailored suit, his wristwatch ticking with quiet precision. At exactly 6:59, the second chopper door opened and Greer stepped out. Her hair was pinned back loosely, and she wore a midnight blue coat over a dress that shimmered like starlight beneath the hem. She looked nothing like the woman who'd pulled him off the sidewalk, but everything like someone who belonged on a rooftop with a man like him. She walked toward him when tugging at her hem. "You sent a helicopter," she said. He held out a hand to take hers. "You didn't leave your number." "I had to improvise." "That explains the gift," she said. "And the whole mystery man with an agenda vibe." He gestured toward the waiting aircraft. "I wanted to show you something. Let me guess." "It's a penthouse with a view, a private chef, and a piano you pretend to play when you're alone." He smiled. "Close, but not quite." She hesitated, then took his hand. The chopper lifted into the air, slicing through the Manhattan skyline. Greer watched through the window as the city shrank beneath her, glittering and endless. "Where are we going?" she asked over the headset. "You'll see." They landed in less than 20 minutes. A private rooftop garden stretched beneath them, terraced with olive trees, marble fountains, and a long dining table set for two beneath strings of Edison bulbs. Beyond it, the ocean shimmered in the distance. Greer stepped out and turned in a slow circle. "This is not just a date. This is a Bond villain's lair. I don't do ordinary." She walked to the table, running her fingers along the crystal glassware. "And what's for dinner?" "Unicorn steak." Chef's surprise. A soft light illuminated the space as two servers brought out the first course. Tristan pulled out her chair. She sat, watching him carefully. "So," she said, "what's your angle?" "There isn't one. You tracked down my address, sent me a helicopter, and rented out a rooftop with a view of the Atlantic. That sounds like an angle." "I wanted to see you again," he said simply. She picked up her fork. "You could have just called. You didn't leave a number." She laughed once short, surprised. "Okay, fair." They ate slowly, the conversation meandering from her latest design job to his childhood in Boston. He told her about the time he'd nearly set his father's study on fire with a chemistry set. She told him about the mural she'd painted in high school that got her suspended for depicting the principal as a lizard. For a while, it didn't feel like a billionaire and a freelance designer. It felt like two people on the edge of something they couldn't name. As dessert arrived, she leaned back in her chair. "This is insane," she said. "You know that, right? Is that a bad thing?" "I don't know yet." He stood and offered a hand. "Come with me." They walked to the edge of the rooftop, where a telescope had been set up, pointed at the stars. He adjusted it and stepped back. "Take a look." She peered through the lens, then blinked. "Is that Saturn? With its rings," he said. "It'll be visible for another hour." She looked at him. "You planned this." "I planned a moment. Whether it works is up to you." She studied him for a long time. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you." She stepped closer, the city wind tugging at her coat. "You still haven't told me why." "Why what?" "Why me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because you saw me fall and you didn't look away." She didn't answer, but she didn't pull back when he reached for her hand. And somewhere above them, the stars kept turning. Greer sat cross-legged on her studio floor. A dozen color swatches fanned out across the planks, her laptop glowing in the dim lamplight beside her. Pickles was curled up at her feet, snoring softly. She tapped the side of her pencil against her chin as she stared at the mock-up on the screen. The deadline wasn't until Monday, but her concentration had been fractured ever since the night on that rooftop. The telescope, the look in his eyes when he'd said, "You didn't look away." It wasn't just a compliment. It was a revelation. She stood and crossed to the tiny kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water. The silence stretched comfortable but too quiet. She didn't want to admit it, but she missed his voice. and that unsettled her more than she liked. Before she could spiral further, there was a knock at the door. She checked the time, past 10. No one visited her this late. She peeked through the peephole and froze. Tristan stood on the other side, no coat, no entourage. Just him in a dark sweater, looking like he'd walked through every burrow to get there. She opened the door slowly. "Did something happen? I needed to see you," he said, not waiting for an invitation before stepping inside. She closed the door behind him. "You're dripping." "I walked. You have cars. I didn't want to be anyone else when I came here." She folded her arms. "And who are you now?" "Someone who hasn't stopped thinking about you." She studied him carefully. "You didn't answer your phone the next morning. I called the number on the card." He blinked. "You called? Once. I didn't know." Carter must have intercepted it. "So you're telling me your assistant screens your personal calls now?" "Only when he thinks I'm making reckless decisions." "Is that what this is? Reckless?" He stepped closer. "I don't know what this is, but it's the first thing in a long time that doesn't feel like a power move or a calculated risk." She didn't respond. The air between them felt taut, stretched too thin. He looked around the apartment. "You've been painting, designing, for a boutique in Soho. They want soft curves and muted tones, but I think it needs contrast." "Let me see." She hesitated, then picked up her sketch pad from the coffee table and handed it over. He flipped through the pages slowly. "These are sharp, confident. I'm trying to convince them to take a bolder direction. You already have a voice in your work." She raised an eyebrow. "You don't strike me as someone who notices that kind of thing." "I notice everything about you." The words landed between them like a weight. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "You're used to getting what you want, aren't you?" she asked. "I'm used to negotiating for it," he said quietly. "But you're not a deal I can close." She walked past him to the window, pulling the curtain aside. Rain streaked the glass, the streetlights below casting long shadows across the room. "Why now?" she asked without turning around. "You could have anyone. Why chase after someone who can't even afford her own space?" "Because you're the only person I've met in years who doesn't disappear behind the version of me with a net worth and a last name." She turned to face him. "That's not a reason. That's a reaction." He stepped forward. "Then how about this? You challenge me. You don't let me hide behind charm or money. You make me curious in a way that terrifies me." She stared at him, pulse ticking beneath her skin. "I don't want to be a phase," she said finally. "You won't be. And I don't want to be a secret. You won't be that either." She crossed her arms again, but it was more to hold herself together than to push him away. "You're not exactly the kind of guy who fits into my world. Then I'll make room in mine." She let out a breath, loud in the quiet space. "I don't do casual. I don't have the time or the emotional bandwidth to tangle myself into something that's going to unravel. I'm not asking for casual." "Then what are you asking for?" He touched her wrist. "Just lightly. A chance." She looked at his hand, then back at his face. "You're intense. So are you." She moved past him, picking up her hoodie from the couch. "I need air." He followed her to the door. "I'll walk with you." The two of them stepped into the cool night. The rain had lightened to a mist and the streets were quiet. They didn't speak as they walked, the only sound the soft splash of their shoes against the sidewalk. After a few blocks, she stopped beside a small park. The swings were still wet, but she sat on one anyway. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "My parents used to bring me here when I was little," she said. "Before my dad left." He sat on the swing next to her. "My mom worked 2 jobs. I used to wait here after school with my sketchbook. It was the only time I felt uninterrupted." He looked over. "You still draw like that?" "Sometimes. When I'm not trying to please clients or make rent." "You shouldn't have to fight to be heard." "Everyone fights for something," she said. "You probably just forget what it's like." "I haven't forgotten." She turned to him, surprised. "No? My father didn't hand me the company. He didn't even want me involved. I spent 5 years building out the logistics arm while he pretended I was on vacation." She blinked. "Seriously? I didn't inherit the empire. I forced my way into it." She studied him. "You always talk like that, like everything is strategy." "It had to be, until now." She looked down at her hands. then back up. I need to know you mean this. Then let me show you. He stood and held out a hand again. She took it. They walked back slowly through the quiet streets, their joined hands swinging between them. And though neither of them said the words, something had shifted less like a beginning and more like the moment just before a leap. The gallery was quieter than expected. Greer stood in the center of the second floor, surrounded by stark white walls and a halo of soft amber lighting. The air carried the faint scent of varnish and linen canvas, and the hum of distant conversation echoed from the lower level where the guests mingled over hors d'oeuvres and champagne. But up here, this was her space, her work, her name, printed in clean serif text at the entrance. Greer O'Malley, color in motion, her first solo showcase. She exhaled slowly, fingers curled tight around the edge of a champagne flute she hadn't touched. The opening had been a success. The curator had already whispered about a possible second show. A buyer from Paris had asked for her card. But none of it felt real yet, not until she saw him. Tristan appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed in a charcoal three-piece suit, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on her. And in that moment, the noise faded. She didn't speak until he reached her. "You're late," she said, not out of annoyance, but because the words steadied her. "I wanted to make sure it was your night before I made it ours," he replied. Her heart pulled tight. He glanced at the piece behind her, a large canvas painted in layered, sweeping strokes of rust, gold, and deep cobalt. "This one's yours," he said. "They're all mine." "No," he said, stepping closer. "This one is you. It's bold, even when it doesn't ask to be." Greer looked away, but only for a second. "You didn't tell me you were flying in from Geneva today. I didn't want you thinking about anything except this. You've earned every second of it." She traced the edge of the frame with her fingertips. "You didn't have to come." "I did," he said. "Because this what you're building, it's the most real thing I've ever seen." She stayed quiet, letting the weight of his words settle. "Then, did you ever fix things with your father?" Tristan nodded once. "He called last week. Said he saw the article in the Times. Asked if the woman who designed the mural in the background was the same one who dragged me off the sidewalk. And? I told him she was the woman I'm in love with." Greer's heart stopped, then surged forward again. "You said that." "I meant it." She searched his face, looking for the cracks, but there were none. "Only certainty." "I didn't think you'd ever say that out loud," she whispered. "I didn't think I would either. But then you handed me a cup of coffee like I was just some guy, and I started wanting things I didn't know I was missing." She placed her glass on the empty pedestal beside her and turned fully toward him. "I've spent most of my life trying to be invisible just long enough to survive," she said. "And the moment I stopped trying, you saw me. I didn't just see you. I couldn't look away." The sound of clapping erupted downstairs. "They're calling you," he said. "I know." "Go," he said, stepping back. "This is your moment." She didn't move. "Come with me." He hesitated, just a heartbeat. Then he nodded. They descended the staircase together. The lights shifted warmer as they reached the main gallery, and a small crowd parted instinctively, attention turning in their direction. Whispers followed their steps, but Greer didn't shrink beneath them. The curator approached with a beaming smile. "Greer, the buyers from Milan are here, and the director of the Easton Foundation wants to speak about a commission." Greer turned to Tristan. "Milan." He stepped aside. "They asked for my opinion. I might have mentioned your name." She narrowed her eyes. "You did more than mention it. I called in a favor. One. The rest is all you." She shook her head. "You're impossible." He leaned in. "I'm yours." The curator cleared her throat politely. "Shall I introduce you?" Greer blinked, then looked back at Tristan. "Will you stay?" "I'm not going anywhere." She nodded slowly, then followed the curator into the crowd, leaving him at the edge of the room. But even from a distance, she felt his presence solid, grounding. It wasn't the rooftop dates or the gifts, not even the telescope or the compass. It was that he showed up over and over without asking her to become someone else. By the time the gallery began to thin, Greer found her way back to him. He stood beside one of her earliest pieces, a smaller canvas with jagged lines and deep shadows, the kind of work born from exhaustion and hunger and stubborn hope. He was quiet as she approached. "You know what I realized?" she asked. "What?" "You never asked me to change." I never wanted to. She reached into her bag and pulled out something small, a metal chain with the compass he'd given her, now worn like it belonged in her hand. I added something, she said, flipping it over. Below the original engraving, a new line had been etched, I'm not lost anymore. He stared at it, then at her. I love you, she said. And I'm not scared to say it anymore. His jaw tightened just slightly, emotion catching before he spoke. I've built towers across continents, he said. But you're the first thing I've ever built toward. She took his hand, holding it with both of hers. Then let's stop running and start building. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. He opened it slowly, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, with a sapphire set in a halo of diamonds. Nothing flashy. Nothing loud. Just right. I'm not asking you to give anything up, he said. I'm asking if I can stand beside you while you rise. Will you marry me, Greer O'Malley? The room faded. The gallery. The paintings. The past. It was only him. Her answer was already in her chest before it reached her lips. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the applause that followed wasn't from a crowd this time. It was from the handful of people still lingering, watching the moment unfold like a scene from a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was the reality they'd fought for. Together. Later that night, long after the guests had left and the gallery lights had dimmed, Tristan and Greer stood on the rooftop of the building, her head against his shoulder. He looked out at the city. You know what I remember most about that day in the rain? He asked. What? I wasn't thinking about anything. Not stocks. Not meetings. Nothing. And then I fell. And you were there. I didn't think I was saving a billionaire, she said softly. You weren't. He kissed the top of her head. You were saving the man who was about to fall for you. She slid her arms around his waist. And you never got up. He smiled against her hair. Not really. They stood in silence, the wind brushing past them like a promise. And somewhere below, in the city that had once swallowed them whole, their life together had already begun. Greer stood barefoot in the center of Tristan's sunlit kitchen, her engagement ring glinting as she flipped a pancake onto a waiting plate. Jazz curled softly through the penthouse's hidden speakers, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted through the air. The marble countertops were cluttered with ingredients. A half-sliced orange, a bowl of whipped cream, and a mess of flour she hadn't meant to spill. Tristan leaned against the doorway, sleeves rolled, watching her with a look that made her heart stutter every time. His hair was damp from the shower, and he held a mug in one hand, the other tucked into the pocket of his lounge pants. Am I dreaming, or did you just voluntarily cook something that didn't come from a private chef? She asked without turning. I had to prove I'm not completely useless in a kitchen, he said. That, and I was hoping to impress your mother. Greer laughed as she turned. She's not coming for 2 more days. Exactly. I need practice. She handed him a plate. Then start with syrup. It's in the cabinet to your left. Not the one with the wine glasses. He opened the wrong one. Twice. They sat across from each other at the kitchen island, eating in companionable silence. Greer's foot brushed his under the table. He didn't pull away. I was thinking, she said after a moment. What if we held the wedding at the old conservatory near the botanical gardens? His brows lifted slightly. I thought you wanted something small. I do. But it's quiet there. Romantic. Feels like us. He set his fork down. Then we'll make it happen. I'll call the director today. Greer tilted her head. Tristan. He paused. Don't call in favors. I don't want who you are to make this easier. I want it to be ours because we chose it, not because someone was afraid to say no to you. A beat passed. Then he nodded. Okay. No shortcuts. She reached across the table, lacing her fingers with his. I love you, but if you try to buy out the conservatory, I will actually elope with pickles. He laughed. Understood. Later that afternoon, Greer sat in the sunroom with her laptop open, finalizing a commission from an arts foundation in Florence. She adjusted the digital brush on her tablet, lost in the rhythm of color and form. when Tristan entered with a small box in his hand. "I have something for you," he said. She looked up. "If it's another 7-figure painting, I'm going to throw you off your own balcony." "It's not," he said, setting it in her lap. Inside, resting on navy velvet, was a brass key. Greer looked up, puzzled. "What's this for?" "A studio. On the Lower East Side. North-facing windows, natural light, and a freight elevator for installations. I signed the lease this morning." She blinked. "You why?" "You've outgrown your apartment. You need space. A place that's yours, not shared with dog crates and design clients who think a font can solve their branding crisis." Her throat tightened. "Tristan, I can't let you." "It's not a gift," he said gently. "It's an investment. In you. You can pay me back if it makes you feel better. Or you can just keep creating and let it be what it is." She closed the lid of the box. "You know what I really want? Name it. A place where I can paint barefoot. Where pickles can sleep in a patch of sun. Where you bring me coffee and distract me with kisses until I forget what I was doing." He moved closer. "Done." She stood and wrapped her arms around his waist. "This is real, isn't it?" He pressed his lips to her forehead. "More real than anything I've built." 2 weeks later, Greer stood under a canopy of glass and ivy as soft rain kissed the roof of the conservatory. The scent of jasmine and rose drifted through the air, and candlelight flickered from hundreds of tiny lanterns suspended from the rafters. She wore a dress of silk and tulle, the color of moonlight. Her hair was braided with tiny pearls, and her hands trembled slightly as she held her bouquet. Across from her, Tristan stood in a tailored slate suit. A navy tie knotted at his throat. His eyes locked on hers like nothing else in the room existed. Carter stood beside him, looking surprisingly emotional for a man who typically scheduled board meetings like military operations. The officiant spoke, but Greer barely heard the words. Her focus was on Tristan's hands, the slight crease in his brow, the way his thumb brushed hers when they linked fingers. "I never believed in fate," he said when it was his turn. "But then I met you. And everything that came before stopped feeling like coincidence." She swallowed hard, struggling to speak past the lump in her throat. "I spent years trying to carve out a place in the world," she whispered. "But you're the first person who ever handed me space and said, 'Take it. It's yours.'" They exchanged rings, though Greer had insisted hers be simple gold, unembellished, the kind of thing she could wear while painting without worrying about smudging it. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Tristan didn't wait for permission. He kissed her like the world had narrowed to just that moment. The guests clapped and cheered as the rain slid down the glass roof, a symphony of soft percussion. The reception was intimate. No press, no hired influencers, no corporate sponsors. Just friends, family, and a slow dance under strings of soft lights. As the evening wore on, Tristan pulled Greer onto the dance floor again, even though the music had stopped. "No one's playing," she laughed. "Don't care," he said, swaying with her anyway. "I just want you close." She rested her head on his shoulder, the scent of his cologne grounding her. "This is the life I never imagined," she whispered. He kissed her temple. "This is the life we made." The next morning, they boarded a private plane bound for Santorini, a honeymoon Greer hadn't wanted to plan, but Tristan had insisted on experiences over extravagance. They stayed in a cliffside villa with whitewashed walls and blue shutters where she painted at sunrise and he read beside her. They swam in coves unreachable by road, made dinner together on a balcony tangled in bougainvillea, and spent long hours talking about everything. They still wanted to build an art residency in the city, a foundation for young designers, maybe someday, a family. One night, as they lay beneath the stars, Greer traced the constellation lines across Tristan's chest. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I was wrong," she said. "About what?" "About who you were. I thought you were a man who had everything. But really you're a man who gave everything to find the one thing that matters." He turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You." She nodded. "Me." They lay in silence, the waves below whispering against the cliffs. And when she fell asleep in his arms, there were no questions left. No fears. No gaps. Just two souls tangled together in a life they'd chosen, one not built on wealth or power, but on the quiet resilience of love found in the most unexpected places. Forever had already begun.